Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as you see what's going on on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today. Having a bit of a stretch because we just got done with today's stream. I will say it's probably maybe the cutest thumbnail art that we've done for the stream so far. It's actually, it depending on how I end up rendering it, it might actually end up being my favourite. It's just so cute. And probably the one which channels, I think, Dean, like, who she is the most. But anyway, hello everyone. We're now in Fawnhallow at 6:02 PM on Sunday, March 16th, 2025. Yeah, but anyway, we're not speaking about that right now. I'm also looking at it, and I think the perspective I've got it kind of wrong from what I intended it to be. I think the background is actually too low down, but whatever. I'll fix that next time. It was very intense because you'll see it next week, or you can see it on Twitch right now, twitch.tv/deardarling probably, where it took me a long time to actually do it, and the actual sketch layers are just absolutely inconceivable, unpassable. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're actually here to talk about D&D, surprisingly, because I spoke a little bit about it yesterday, which was mainly more of a sort of behind the scenes ideas behind it, which I was also like trying to juggle not giving too much away, but luckily it was actually a session which I could actually talk more about, and the preparation didn't matter too much. There's nothing really to spoil because the things which are planned were not like, well, one, would already happened, and two, they're not big lore parts which like completely shake up everything. But I can say now that we've done the session, and I think it went pretty well. Obviously, I don't think everything went perfectly smoothly, but again, this is me and my perfectionism. For no apparent reason, disallowing any sort of... not disallowing it, but like always looking for room for improvement is perhaps a better way to put it. I think it went pretty well, all things considered, especially because it was, one, a big group. It's difficult exactly to know what's going on. You know, not only have I not done it, the players haven't done it, so it's like a difficult balance, and everyone's meeting for the first time. Well, not the people are not meeting, but the characters are meeting for the first time. I would say the overall things I would say is that the battle definitely was too long, and the battle ended up, surprisingly, being way too easy. But it ended up being easy in the way which was like, I think, forgivable, in the sense it was like, there wasn't, most of it, the reason that it was easy is because the monsters rolled terribly. If you don't know, there was 8 level 8 PCs essentially fighting together. And I, using Kobold Press, made a deadly encounter, and they said that a deadly encounter of, I can't remember if I did 4. I think I did 4 whites at the end. 4 whites, a Hydra, and a Cloaker. That was, I think, by itself already deadly, or maybe it was like 5 whites made it deadly or something. Originally, I was going to put 6 whites in, but then I was like, okay, that's going to be like way too many like actions on the thing. Let's not do that. And I nerfed the whites a little bit because I wanted them more to be of a nuisance rather than them to be much of a threat. And I buffed the Cloaker and a Hydra. I buffed the Cloaker and Hydra, by the way, by a lot. Like, I basically gave them like +2, a minimum +2 stats, I think, across the board. I increased the AC by like 4 or 3, I can't remember. I almost doubled the Cloaker's health pool and added like some amount of the Hydra's health pool, I can't remember as well. Bumping them up from what I predict would have been CR8 to something like CR11, maybe. I don't know. But I was also like, I'm not going to make it completely unfair at the same time. I'm going to make them basically fight the Cloaker, then they'll have 2 rounds to do whatever they can, and then the Hydra will come out, and then so they sort of stagger the fight instead of having it all at once, which I thought would be a bit overwhelmingly too much to deal with. Mainly because the difficulty when it comes to these high CR monsters is the fact that they do a lot of damage with each hit. So the difficulty basically becomes, oh, you got hit, you're dead, which is not as fun as maybe amusingly being a bit more of a bullet sponge might be a bit more interesting. Well, not interesting is not the right word, but yeah. What else was I going to say about this? Yeah, so I do think if I were to do the battle again, what I probably would have done is I probably would have actually gotten rid of the whites entirely and just made it a duo boss battle with a buff cloaker and a really heavily buffed Hydra. Hydra, such that the Hydra would have like I'm trying to think how to say it, legendary actions or resistances or something. Make it feel more like a boss, and either maybe have a Hydra act like twice or something instead of having a whites. Basically just give him a turn on the initiative order. I think that's what I would have changed if I were to do it again. But I don't blame myself for not doing that, because that's hard, I think, to see in retrospect, because it turns out I knew 8 players was going to take a long time for us to get through every single player and the turns. It ended up being the battle was like 3 hours for like 6 rounds or something. And I never felt like I was like slugging for it necessarily, because I think a lot of it as well, I was basically trying to do it like, not as quickly as possible, but trying to do it in such a way that I was like, yes, I'm not going to waste too much time with like doing overly fancy descriptions like I usually did. Although I did realise basically partway through the battle, I was like, this feels really boring if I don't have any descriptions whatsoever. So instead I changed it to very sort of minimal description and just the like sound effects. Which I should have done from the beginning, but so be it. But yeah. What else was I going to say about it? I'm not really sure. So the battle definitely took longer than I expected it to. It wasn't my intention for it to be that long, but again, sometimes that's just kind of how it happens. But overall, I feel like the choice of enemies were pretty good, to be honest. I think there was nonetheless some very amusing moments. And really, the reason it ended up being so easy is because one of the players managed to incapacitate the Hydra like immediately as they spawned for an entire round, and then literally again, the Bard was absolutely popping off. Like she incapacitated the Hydra, like it failed to save, it rolled like a 1 or something, and then Phantasmal Killer made it like run away from everyone, which was ridiculous as well. There was like 4 opportunity attacks or something that occurred on it, and then it got incapacitated again on the next turn, and then finally it got 1 turn, and no joke, it had 7 heads at this point. It attacked 1 player because I was like, we got to do this. It rolled a 4, a 2, a 3, a 1, a natural 20, and then like another 2, and then a random hit. So it had 7 attacks, which all I think had a decent chance of hitting. Like it was above 50% chance of hitting from what I recall. And it hit twice, 1 being a critical hit, and no joke, the critical hit damage was 12 damage. I did more damage with a normal attack than with a critical hit damage or something like that, and I was like, what? How could this be possible? It was really funny though, to be honest. I have no gripes against it. I'd rather it be this way round than it be the other way round, where my players are just like, this felt impossible, because we just rolled it extremely poorly. Yeah, so it was a very interesting sort of consequence, everything as it came out to be. The elevation played a little part. I wanted it to play more of a part, but I think the fight ended up just being so easy that I didn't really play much of a part in the end. But I wanted it to play a part in the sense that like they would have to decide about elevation to like get line of sight and things like that. And it mattered a little bit because the Cloaker did manage to get an amazing fear off on everyone. Too bad that fear only lasts 1 round, so maybe not as amazing as you think it would be. But they got a great fear off on everyone. Not on everyone, but like I think 2 people passed it or something. It was, I don't know, surprising. Surprisingly good, as a case may be. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. It just ended up being, just because of low rolls, really. It ended up being a lot easier a fight than I anticipated it to be, and I think that's okay. It wasn't, of course, my intention for it to be ridiculously unfair, challenging, anything like that, but it was my intention for it to at least be maybe a bit more challenging than it was, and a bit faster than it actually ended up being, but so be it. Yeah, what else can I sort of say about it? Apart from that, afterwards we had a little thing where they all got to sort of meet up together. This is where I think the only mistake I probably did was one of the party members was just like, oh, I want to cast Detect Thoughts, and I was like, okay, that's fine, you can read some surface level thoughts or whatever. Then I think it makes sense that you would do it before you actually met them. And then they wanted to probe deeper, and this is the part where I should have stepped in, because we do have a rule, I say that I'm like, no PvP unless expressly permitted on both sides and agreed beforehand. It's just a blanket rule because I think it's easier this way. I don't want to have to deal with any sort of potential animosity which could occur from it. And you might be like, well, friends here, why would there be animosity? I think that's fair, but I still think there is a risk of it, and I don't want to deal with that headache, to be perfectly honest. So that's my rule, and I guess my perspective is, if you want to do PvP, do your own thing. Like, you can organize it, you can do it with the same characters if you want, I don't care. But I'm not going to do it. This is where I should have stepped in and been like, I'm gonna, like, as a DM, sort of forbid you from probing deeper, because that would be very much considered like an aggressive action, especially because you just met each other. So then that happened, and then like things escalated between them, unsurprisingly. And then I was like, okay, this is where I was like, okay, pause, step back. I am, as a DM, I'm overruling, I'm retconning this last little bit because this is ridiculous. This is obviously not what I intended and not what it should be about. And then, to be fair, the players were just like, okay, yeah, fair enough. I think all the players played very naturally to how they would play. I don't think anyone played out of character or anything. I think it would have all made sense. But the things like that, because everyone is a player character there, those aren't NPCs, I was not comfortable with letting that continue as the way it did. So, there you go. The DM lesson learned. You got to be a lot more cautious with these sort of things. Because there's a built-up repertoire between the internal parties, but across parties, of course, there is no internal repertoire. So they're essentially treating them as suspicious strangers. But anyway, that was fine. And then we basically went on to roleplay for 2 hours. It was silly. I personally thought that this was different from my expectations. I was like, maybe what they would talk about would be like short introductions with their characters, and they might talk about like their history and that sort of thing. They can exchange information that way. But what they ended up talking about was absolute nonsense. They were all very suspicious of each other and didn't want to give any information away. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I guess no metagaming here, which is fair enough. But I felt like they might want to play into the meta a little bit and be like, oh yeah, these seem like good people. But they didn't, which is fair enough. And like, I'm not going to fault them for that. They were definitely way more suspicious than I thought. But to be fair, one of the parties also like made a mistake before, being way too trusting, and that really bit them in the butt. And the other party is naturally a bit more suspicious, to be honest. So yeah. What could have, I will say, there could have been information exchange, and that could have been information which would have been useful to the other party. Not much of that was really exchanged, to be honest, and it ended up being more comedic, which is, I would much prefer it go in that direction, because that's like something lighthearted where people don't have to get fully invested in, because I don't want it to feel like they have to rely on the other party for the information, or the information they can get from the other party they could get from their own campaign as well. It's just more like of a shortcut or something. And I'm trying to think of like ways which would not be so like crazy spoilery. But like, I'll take my DM NPC for an example. It's like, she is very well versed in the arcane and magic. While her specialty definitely tends to be more like automatons and that sort of thing. She knows a lot about magic. There was potential for them to ask magical questions related to her, and she would actually be able to give a pretty decent answer. Because that campaign I don't think have connections with many powerful spellcasters. She's not like a super powerful spellcaster, but she's an academic, which is a whole different thing, right? So that was like potential there. And then like from the other way, well, I won't spoil it, I suppose. There could have been some other questions which people would have known about, but hey ho. That's not that important, because that information they can get from that campaign. Like, that's what I'm saying, it's not exclusive. It's sort of like, when you play a game or something, and the social element can help accelerate the game a little bit faster, but is not necessary. You can still play the game single player, and it works out in the end. That's perhaps how I describe it. But yeah, what else can I talk about with regards to it? There's definitely a lot to be learned from it. I think next time I will, because they'll probably have a crossover session again at some point. I'm not sure. I think I will organize it more in advance so they definitely know it's coming. I don't know how I'm gonna like weave it in. I think I would probably cut down on the combat, or I'd make the combat feel more like it's one boss taking multiple actions rather than having all these disparate units spread out. Or I'd give, like, I would want to make the boss a bit more interesting, I suppose, in a way. And give them some more fail-safes about it just like insta-losing or something. But I think I would tone down it, like I wouldn't make it so much of a hell sponge. It's okay if a boss fight goes on for like 3 rounds or something. If a boss is taking multiple actions, I think that ends up working. So I think that would be what I would do. It doesn't need to be like a deeply strategic fight, because that I think is easier to do in my own individual campaigns when I know like better the interactions between how they're going to work together, etc., etc. And I think I would give more reason for the social element to exist. I think it's fair that this one didn't have much of a reason because they were just like getting introduced. It's more by circumstance. But I think it would be nice to see the two groups sort of form some sense of camaraderie together and have a comfortable level of role-playing that they do within their own groups, but across each other. Because at the end of the day, we're all a group of friends, right? Or everyone in their campaigns knows each other and presumably likes to talk with each other. So being able to have that sort of banter shared across would have been nice as well. So I don't know. I feel like because they met in a circumstance on like enemy ground, which to be fair was not meant to be enemy ground, but circumstances happened in D&D campaigns. So I think next time if they meet on more like friendly ground, like with like a mutual ally or something who's like can vouch for both sides. So it's like a friend of a friend situation. They have more reason to trust each other. They have more reason to sort of like relax their guard. I think that could be better. Not necessarily from like it will make a better story in D&D, but I think it will make a better sort of social event, if that makes sense. Because that's what the aim of this is. It's not necessarily to play the D&D campaign, but it's to have a social, friendly event. I think it's given me a lot to think about, and I think there's a lot to learn. But I still think I'm very happy with how it turned out in the end, especially because there's so much unknown. I don't know what would have ended up happening. So I'm glad it basically was, apart from one little hiccup, basically fine, wasn't it? Anyway, on that note, I think I'll round this episode off here. I don't really have much else to say about the actual D&D because there's not much lore that I can dive into. Because there wasn't really much in the first place. There's some sort of like little tidbits here and there. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see the next group's campaigns, because one of the groups is basically, I think, going to do that heist thing. I don't even know what their plan is, so it could go catastrophically wrong. We'll see. And the other group has a lot of like inter-group drama at the moment, which is obviously not going to be super serious drama. At the end of the day, if it does end up being super serious, then I'm going to be like, hey, we're going to have to have more of like a literal meta talk. Obviously, I need to run a campaign where the group actually kind of wants to work together, so we're going to have to figure out some way to resolve it. But we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. It's just it's like more like emotions of the characters, not the players, of the characters got heated, and it's going to be juicy, I think. Anyway, I'm going to round this out episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Bye-bye for now.